We do have an absolute requirement for glucose, but it's not the hundreds of grams that the RDAs might suggest. It's probably a few grams here and there, just sprinkled in just for the brain to operate.
Protein synthesis can be activated for up to 36 hours, did you say?
Yes, it tends to peak around then, but it can last maybe 3 days and things like that.
Oh, right, okay. So again, because a lot of people will say, well, you're not going to absorb all the protein if you're eating one meal a day. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a very special guest, as you can see. His name is Jonathan Griffiths, and he's known as the original carnivore bodybuilder. This will be a breeze for you. I've just got some pretty basic questions, but I think that my audience will probably benefit from having you answer them because you're the guy, you're the expert when it comes to exercise, bodybuilding specifically, and the carnivore diet. So maybe you could just start off by giving us a brief background as to who you are, when and how you found carnivore, and what that's been doing for you thus far.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a 28-year-old man from south of England, quite a few hundred miles away from Lee here. His name's Lee, not Kent, for anyone that's wondering. And yes, I've been bodybuilding now for about 15 years. Did my first competition, I was about age 16 roughly. Been training all that time. Very heavy, intensive sports background, training up to 15 hours per week, doing sprint training, athletics, weightlifting, bodybuilding, American football, rugby, football. Unfortunately, I got an injury, which basically happened to my back. I'd say I was about the age of 13 years old. Very frustrating, not pleasant, very debilitating. So I've had to find ways around that. So I've obviously stopped all the tough stuff, so the rugby, the football, American football, that sort of thing. And I just basically started to go towards the bodybuilding side of it. And that's a bit safer, there's more control. You're not being bashed around by people. You're in control of your own body. So it suits me just fine. And basically what happened was I was competing or getting ready for competition back in 2000, I want to say maybe 12. I did a diet of tuna and eggs for 5 months. So we're talking 5 cans of tuna a day, a couple of eggs, not a lot. So basically no saturated fat to speak of really, not much omega-3, very low fat, high-ish sort of protein diet. And I noticed initially some things improved, so I didn't feel as bloated, but down the line I did get mercury poisoning, which was horrendous, destroyed my mental health. And I've been working against that for quite a long time, but I'd say I'm pretty much out of the woods there now. Fast forward a bit, so obviously went off that, a lot of people that bodybuild binge at some point, because you can't maintain that sort of diet for a long period of time. It's not a lifelong way of eating. And basically what I did was I tried again the carnivore diet in February 2020. And it's been quite a tremendous experience because not only have I learned more about my body, I've had more ability to curse with different people, do things, talk with different people about stuff. And I say that because it's a very key thing. So when you're trying to market yourself, you have to be able to speak to people. I'm not the most extroverted person. I'm very introverted, but I managed to run a successful online nutrition consultancy from that. So basically, 4 years in. And I say a lot about the social side of it because I do suffer with something called autistic spectrum disorder. I was diagnosed when I was about 21 years old, so very late, which is very unfortunate, but life goes on. I suffered with years of depression, anxiety, and with the help of the carnivore diet, a lot of those symptoms that I was having has been greatly reduced. And I'd say if I was on any other diet, my spine would be in a much worse shape than what it is right now.
Yeah, go up with a stronger leg first, and then followed by the rest of it.
So I've used the carnivore diet for a number of different things. It's not just weight loss, MS, diabetes, nothing like that. It's just loads and loads of different things, mental, physical, well-being. I'd even say that there's some kind of spiritual sense to it as well. I'm not a believer in God per se, but I'll say I've certainly had an experience in just feeling more around different people. And I feel like we're all connected in some kind of mysterious way. That's pretty much my journey in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Yeah. Actually, I was just going to ask, do you feel like you were confused earlier on in your life with certain things that you were feeling? Or did that, how did you go about getting diagnosed with your autism?
Sure, yeah. So I noticed I had a lot of comorbidities, you might call it, lots of illnesses. And I sort of looked down the rabbit hole a bit. So I was like, okay, why do I get ill so often? Why is my digestion so poor? Why do I get inflamed easily? Why do I experience a fatigue around different people? And it all sort of culminated in my mind. And obviously I realized how I reacted around a lot of people at the time when I wasn't very mentally well. And I was like, there's a link here for autism. Turns out I wasn't the most popular person in school. I was generally speaking outcast, which is just the way of life. And funnily enough, I'm now doing the most absurd thing ever, which is making videos about the carnivore diet, bodybuilding. I've got bald hair and I'm a bit goofy and I just get on with it. I've met a lot of like-minded people just like yourself. so many others online that are just there to be positive, there to help people, not in there for selfish means and all that sort of stuff. I'm very empathetic as well, so I understand that, if people around me are in that good state there, that giving kind of state, it all goes around and goes full circle. So I'm just grateful to meet a lot of people like yourself, and where I am right now, in a much mentally stable state. The depression side of it, pretty much gone. I don't really remember what it's like to be depressed. I get anxious days sometimes, but it's so distant, and so I'm not thinking about it at all. It just doesn't come to mind now.
Yeah, it almost feels like a blur, doesn't it, when you reflect back? It's like a previous version of yourself. It's like, that's why I always say I feel like I've been reborn, because you look back peering into this other life and you can kind of remember and recall how you felt, but it's like a blur. It's like another life. So to get onto the exercise side of things, we'll start really, really simple. And it's probably getting a bit old for you, but do we need any carbohydrates to get in a good workout, whether it's HIIT training, cardiovascular training, bodybuilding, strength and conditioning? What's going on there?
Good question. So the short answer is no. The main reason why is because of a process called gluconeogenesis, which is the conversion of non-carbohydrate sources, i.e. protein and fat, and a few other things into glucose. We do have an absolute requirement for glucose, but it's not the hundreds of grams that the RDAs might suggest. It's probably a few grams here and there, just sprinkled in just for the brain to operate. We can get that through protein and fat just fine, as long as we're eating. Now, if we're not eating enough protein, not enough fat, then yeah, you're going to have problems. Just like with any diet, if you miss out the essential macronutrients, you're not going to feel good. Now, we have some interesting literature from Finney and Volek, dating back, I want to say maybe 20 years. And they basically got long distance athletes to do their stuff. And they were in a carbohydrate state or a carbohydrate-free ketogenic state. And they found people in a ketogenic state actually had excellent results in their long-term, long-distance endurance runs, bikes, all that sort of thing. And I've met other people along the way, Zach Bitter, Richard Smith, also from UK, who have experienced the same thing. Well, the thing is, a person that's running for about 6 hours straight or more is going to have a higher requirement for energy than a person who's doing a 45-minute to 1 hour moderately intense workout in the gym. These people that we see, doing long distance runs, if they're eating carbohydrates, they're carbing up. They have to eat a lot of food beforehand. They're not eating just a bowl of cereal. They're eating a lot of food with sugar on it and donuts and all sorts of crap, Skittles, dextrose tablets. Now, if we're in a fat adapted state, we can access the fat on our body, provided we give our body enough food in the first place so we don't get too lean. And that'll sustain us just well. So I believe if we're talking about calories, there's something like, might be wrong here, something like 80 to 100,000 calories in the average adult male in terms of body fat. Now, if we're someone that's using carbohydrates for fuel, we're limited in terms of our accessibility and ease to use and utilize the carbohydrates that are in our body through glycogen. Now that stores at around about, depending how big you are, whatever, 400, 600 grams in the muscle and about 70 grams in the liver. So if you translate that to a long distance run, a person doing a long distance run will not succeed if they're doing just a diet made up of what they're eating the night before. They have to snack and add in food to what they're doing throughout the races. So there's definitely a benefit to the long distance stuff. Now, in terms of the short distance stuff that people are quite concerned about, you can look at myself, carnivore bodybuilder, very, very, very high intensity training. I take sets to failure. I've got lots of shorts and videos on how I train. I do sessions that last about 40 minutes, so it works for me. And I'm actually in a cutting phase or a fat loss phase right now, and I can still train really hard in the gym. So it tells me I'm fat adapted. I'm using my stored body fat. Other examples, Dr. Sean Baker, world record holder for indoor rowing. That's one example. There's so many other examples like this. There's actually a few sprinters I know of, and there's actually some rock climbers that I know of. Or I believe one of or the best rock climber in the world is actually on a carnivorous diet. So it tells me you've got a whole bounty of people that are using it. The unfortunate thing is a lot of people won't talk about it. They won't give away the secret. The carnivore diet is a bit of a hack in my experience, at least from my 15 years of building my body and the last 4 years doing it with or without a carnivorous diet. I can say it is absolutely so much easier to stay leaner and your performance is more balanced. You don't get energy swings, mood crashes. Your sleep's better because you're not putting inflammatory junk in your body, better nutrient assimilation and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I've noticed everything tends to just, it's like fine tuned. Everything's like perfect. So I go to bed at night, I'm rested well. As long as I get the sunlight and all that sort of stuff, all the sort of hacks we're meant to be doing anyway. as human beings, then I feel fine doing that. I don't have any detriment to my training at all. Now, I actually did a study. I say study, it wasn't strict in that sense, but it was, I measured what I could and I was very honest with my results and what I did. And I did a 3-day meat, fruit and honey experiment. So I equated the calories and I then actually had the same amount of protein each day, but I reduced the fat and increased the carbohydrates. In that time, my training performance I used leg exercises just because they're intensive and they give a good reflection of your brute raw power, strength sort of thing. Went down by about 10 to 15%. So that tells me, okay, why was that? I started to do a bit of research, digging, asked a few experts, and turns out you have more lactic acid, more burn, which means you can't train as long. There's a lactate threshold where your body just doesn't want to get past that point. Your body's trying to effectively stop you from doing more because it will hurt you. So it tells me, okay, well, I could do more in the gym, eating less carbohydrates. So there we have it. I mean, there's obviously confounding variables. I did it overnight. I didn't transition slowly between one diet and the other. But I was just curious, and I wasn't eating, 1,000 grams of carbs. I got them up to about 150, 200 grams, which isn't a substantial amount for someone my body weight. So I weigh about 108 kilos. But yeah, it was absolutely detrimental to my performance, and I had brain fog, headache, sickly, a bit gassy, to be honest. So yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience overall.
Is that because the body's preoccupied with trying to flush out the toxic components, like the fructose and things like that, do you think? Or
I think, in my opinion, it's down to the Randall cycle. So activating it to a too great degree. So that's the cross-inhibition process, which means you've got too many fatty acids and too much glucose in your blood at a given time. Your body works very hard to keep that at a stable amount. When you go too high, it causes a lot of inflammation, leads to advanced glycation end products, which are aging. So we'll see a lot of bodybuilders in this space online, particularly ones that are like in the carb-centric model of eating. They tend to age quite a lot faster than others. Now, I'm not saying this and saying I'm youthful and I look like a teenager. No, I've aged myself because of life circumstances, having that diet previously. But I'd say over the last 4 years, I've slowed down my aging dramatically.
Yeah. Oh, I get the same thing. I mean, I've had, bad skin being on a plant-based diet. I lost my colon on a plant-based diet. I'm sort of still living with the scars, and people say, oh, well, your skin doesn't look great. You've got to have this other surgery, whatever. It's like, yeah, but I'm still paying for the previous lifestyle that's kind of put me in this position.
Absolutely.
Speaking on the other end of things, so we've done our workout, we've depleted muscle glycogen. If we're not eating carbohydrates, how does that work? Is that just a natural process? Can you take us through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, we just eat more fat, basically. The great thing about the carnivore diet is it sounds too good to be true, but your body regulates itself in that your appetite is met, providing you give it the right signals. So you eat enough protein, enough fat. And I actually take a lot of my experience and actually a lot of my understanding from lots of different people. So I'm not, I just listen to Sean Baker, I just listen to Barker, I listen to everyone. And Ted Naiman, I have to give him some credit where it's due. He's not a carnivore advocate per se, but he's very protein centric, and he suggests that if people get their caloric amount, labeled food calorie amount for what it's worth, through protein up to about 40% of that total amount, then they tend to not overeat and they tend to get better body composition outcomes. Now, I'd say that's mostly due to the nutritional side of it. So you've given your body all it needs. You don't seem to have an issue with vitamins or mineral status. That's where you get the vast majority of them from. You give your body the fat as well. So you balance out any potential blood glucose spikes you might have from the extra protein if you're eating too much. The fat basically just gets transmuted into glucose as per requirement. It's an enzymatic process. If we look at it on a flow chart, it's very simple. It's not this stressful thing. Oh, if this hormone goes up and this goes down and this goes round here and it has to go through 10 cycles. No, if you look at it online, it's just very simple enzymatic process down from, enough fat to glucose.
Hurry this process up. They want to straight away, I've come out of the gym. I need to eat some raisins or some grape juice or some, bananas or something like that, high glycemic. The body pretty much takes care of it, knows what it's doing. That's kind of, you're getting in the way perhaps.
Yeah, I think the only argument to be had for someone having a faster food source, so for example, they might chase down some single cream, I don't know, because liquids digest a bit quicker. They might have some MCT oil that'll turn into, ketone bodies very quickly, beta hydroxybutyrate supplementation, That's the only instance where I'd say, yes, you can benefit from that, as in you're training 2 or 3 times per day because that's what your training requires if you're given sport. Now, if you're training once per day, no issue. Anabolic signaling, protein synthesis lasts for about 24 to maybe 36 hours, or at least it peaks for that long. So as long as you're eating in a given day, you're not going to have an issue. And I personally, I eat 3 to 4 times per day. I tend to eat about 2 hours after I train, just based on my appetite. And if you follow your appetite, it's your body saying, I'm ready for this now. Now, if you've just had a stressful workout, your blood glucose is elevated because it's trying to churn out energy to, do the stuff or work that you need to do in the gym, then you'll find that you won't get hungry for a few hours because your body's in that state already, high cortisol, stress hormone. Now, as the stress hormone starts to go down, you're more relaxed, you're in a rest and digest state. So that's when your appetite might then start to get to go up. So there's no bulletproof formula for eating, but if someone is absolutely hungry after the gym, then yeah, have a meal. But I generally find that people tend to not be absolutely starving on this diet,
It's almost like a false behavior. It's learnt behavior. We see other people doing it. We get the shakes in sometimes during the workout, right after, and then we're timing it an hour later. I need to eat my chicken, broccoli and rice and all this kind of stuff. You pretty much read my mind because I was going to ask you about protein synthesis and meal frequency. But you're saying protein synthesis can be activated for up to 36 hours, did you say?
Yes, it tends to peak around then, but it can last maybe 3 days, something like that.
Oh, right. Okay. So again, because a lot of people will say, well, you're not going to absorb all the protein if you're eating 1 meal a day, but that's just not true. We're going to benefit from that protein over a long period of time.
What the most important factor is just to get the protein in over the course of the day. So if someone is looking at their training performance, their body composition, saying things aren't improving, I'm feeling weaker in the gym, I'm tired when I get up, I'm not resting at night, a stressed out body that's not recovered. Yeah, you're probably not giving enough food, you're not resting enough, you're probably staring at artificial lights for too long, at night especially. In which case, yeah, you need to change something. But if someone's getting all their protein in one day, even if it's in 1 meal, I'd say it gives you 95% of results. If that impacts your recovery, your sleep, your digestion, yeah, maybe don't do that. Don't do something your body doesn't want you to do. So I'd say, okay, then split it up a bit. Sean Baker, by his own confession, eats 2 meals per day on average. 1 big meal, one usually slightly smaller meal, might be steak meal 1, eggs meal 2. He'll eat a massive meal. He's a big guy. He's like 6'5", 6'6".
Like, do you recommend anyone takes any supplements, or are we pretty much good to go with red meat, eggs? If you're eating high quality foods like that, you're eating butter, you're eating to satiety, you're getting enough fats, you're getting enough proteins. Is there anything that you feel like we may be falling short of that may be of some benefit?
That's a good question. And yeah, the usual approach would be, eat meat to your full, eat the fat that comes with it, have salt, drink water, that sort of thing. I'd say largely speaking, people tend to have some issue if they do that, in that it doesn't account for the nutritional requirements that we seem to have based on our epigenetic spectrum. So what did our forefathers eat? Were they in a hunter-gatherer tribe? Were they black? Were they white? Were they from an area which had lots of rivers, lots of seas? Did they have a lot of access to fish? Now, it's going to impair your requirements to some degree. Now, yes, you can survive on a meat, beef or lamb only diet. A lot of people seem to do it. I'd say only 3 people I've met in the past year and a half roughly actually do that. So it tells me it's not an absolute requirement to just eat meat. Then you can add in the extra additional animal foods as you see fit. But in terms of the supplementation, I think they can be useful, especially when someone's transitioning. If I give someone a guidance to transition over 4 to 8 weeks, I swap out 1 meal for a week, meal 2 for a week, meal 3 for a week. They don't tend to do it, in which case supplements become more useful because they help bandage up that patch that they're not fixing because they aren't doing it the right way. So your body is like a machine. You've got to, make fine adjustments, like, use a spanner, twist bolts the right way, get it at the right setting. And it's not going to happen overnight. Your gut microbiome greatly affects your mood, mental disposition, physical health, sleep, all sorts of things. Your hunger signaling. And if you change your diet overnight, you won't experience a benefit because, quite frankly, something will go wrong. Generally speaking, this is true. In that instance, if someone wants to rush things, I'd recommend something like magnesium citrate or maybe magnesium glycinate, pure as possible. If you can get it in a capsule, even better. Just pour the capsule out in a bottle or a cup of water. Other things, taurine. If someone tends to overcook their meat or uses low quality processed meat, perhaps taurine's even more useful. It's a very underrated supplement. There's lots of benefits to it. It seems to be involved in many different processes in the body. And I'd say it's not talked about enough. And I've met a lot of people that have experienced the benefit. And I'd say about half people I consult with or work with in a coaching setting seem to benefit from that. Now, there's a few others, a bit hit and miss. It depends who you are, what stage and age and gender you're at. But that's largely it. Vitamin D can be useful. I prefer people to go outside and get some sunlight, but if it's not possible, I work with a lot of paramedics, people in crisis work that have funny shift patterns, nurses, people like that. So well, for them, yeah, maybe something like melatonin could be useful, perhaps. Vitamin D supplementation if they don't get outside. So it's very much a case-by-case basis, but I'd say largely people I speak to do use supplement, but they'll use it for periods of time, like a cycle it in when they find it useful and stop when they don't.
Okay, cool. You did touch on it a little bit earlier, but if say they're a quite experienced lifter and they've learnt about the benefits for health going on a carnivore diet, or at least a very low carb diet, they adopt this way of life and they're moving forward and they're actually noticing a dip in perhaps strength, their results, maybe their numbers are coming down. What would you say that they need to be doing going forward to try and get to optimal strength again, or to even surpass where they were before?
Sure. So I've usually got like a hierarchy of troubleshooting in that things I find to be the most probable causes of that issue. The first one is adaptation period. I adapted very quickly. Within a week, I was back up to my normal lifts. That's not a general experience. It's not what most people experience. So I'm a bit unique in that sense. So transitioning period is one. It might take a few months longer or weeks longer. Second one seems to be eating enough fat. People tend to eat too lean, especially men. They can eat a lot of protein. So, they'll be having chicken breasts and think, oh, that's the carnivore diet. And yeah, strictly speaking, it's true, but you're just not eating enough fat. So you come from a diet where your given macros were 200 protein, 200 carbs, 100 fat per day. Then you go from 200 protein, 0 carbs. You're still at 100 grams of fat. You've knocked out 200 grams of carbs there. So you knocked out a massive proportion of your energy intake. So I'm a big fan of tracking things initially, because then you know where you're at. So try to find that balance in terms of the mass of food that you're taking in. Other issues include overtraining. So, it's easy to watch a video of Sean Baker doing his hardcore workouts and stuff, and it's very impressive. And people think, oh, within a week of doing carnivore diet, I'm going to be like that and break all the world records. That's just not the case. He's adapted over time. So you've got to change the enzymatic system, the bodily functions, your biology, over a period of time. So you might find you can't deal with that much fat at once. So maybe just reduce the carbs a little bit, increase the fat a little bit, reduce the carbs, increase the fat, that's the thing. Just titrate it up and eventually get to the point where you're using the energy so it's effective to be used for your workouts. Troubleshooting outside of that could be a number of different things. It could be overtraining. Generally speaking, I wouldn't go above about 4 sessions per week of an hour in the gym. And that's if you're doing proper resistance training. So you're actually training, you're not chatting to your mates for 2 hours. Another things as well is just not eating the right amount of food. Getting too paranoid about trying to hit the perfect macro ratio. There isn't a perfect macro ratio. Your body has a set requirement of protein and fat. Whatever ratio that lands you is whatever ratio it lands you. I've used as much as 80% fat by caloric value and as much as about 40% fat. So very, very low fat diet. That gets you shredded basically, but you don't attempt that unless you're in a position where you can do that. So you don't start the carnivore diet, try to get shredded immediately. You do that a bit further down the lane when you're fat adapted and your body's used to using your body fat for energy.
Yeah, I like that approach actually. That's smart. It's actually in line with what we would have done in nature as well. If you can't get enough fat, you have to consume the carbohydrates. You have to make up for that. It's a compensatory kind of strategy to replace the energy source, really, isn't it? So,
yeah.
What I was going to ask you is how, because you're saying right now you're in the process of eliminating fat. You're on a bit of a cut. How do you fine tune body composition? How do you play around with those numbers, the fats and the proteins? Say, for example, take us through, your off-season type of thing. You want to build up, you want to bulk up, and then when you start to turn that corner and you want to fine-tune, you want to bring that fat down. What's going on there with the process?
Basically, my main thought is, what can I do in terms of an intervention to change my body composition significantly whilst reducing the amount of stress it has in my life? In that, I see a lot of people reduce fat by half, then they feel like crap. No wonder why. You've halved your energy intake effectively. So, that's one obvious pitfall I notice people do. The main thing is just getting your protein right at the start. And what I'd say is by the end of your, gaining period, bulking period, whatever you want to call it, massing period, you want your intake to be as high as possible. You don't want to be starting when you're just about maintaining weight. You want to be starting when your, food intake is really, really high. So any cuts you do make in your fat perhaps is less significant, less impactful towards your sleep recovery day of life. And generally speaking, I'd say a comfortable rate of fat loss is about 0.5 to 1% per week for total body weight. So a 200-pound person can lose up to about 2 pounds per weight quite feasibly, providing they're not already shredded, and they'll be fine with that. And it'll get to a point where they get very lean, in which case they'll have to make more steep cuts in their fat intake. I tend to keep protein about the same. If not, if someone gets particularly hungry, I'll actually leverage it slightly. So they might start at, for example, 200 protein, 200 fat. Maybe they go up to 210 grams of protein by the end of, say, 3 weeks. They might be down to 160 fat. That's going to be a better way to go about it, because you're going to get the satiety from the protein. All the extra nutrition that they might be losing because they're in a stressed out state. Losing body fat is quite stressful for the most part. So they're getting more vitamins and minerals for the protein that they're taking in. And that will almost compensate for the fat that they've got in their diet. In that you'll still have some nourishment, but you're taking away the energy substrate and let your body use its own body fat for fuel. But it seems to be titrating it is the best way to go about it. And the biggest leverage I use, unless someone's eating carbohydrates, is to just reduce the fat very slowly and find the right amount of activity based on their, age, stage and gender, that sort of thing. And usually I find that people just need to sort themselves out first. So 9 times out of 10 when I work with someone, I tend to get into a baseline diet for about 2 to 3 weeks where they're maintaining their weight. Then I will work out, okay, they feel good here. Okay, now I need to reduce the fat a bit. And that's effectively what I do. And it gives me reproducible results every time. And it's very effective.
Nice. And what's your diet look like at the moment compared to, say, when you were bulking? Give us an example of both.
Sure, yeah. So I'll give you a macro guideline because that's what people kind of want to know. So macro guideline off season would be something like 300 protein, 50 carb, 300 fat. Have a lot of dairy. Dairy seems to leverage weight gain, which is quite obvious, the insulin stuff, the carbohydrate insulin model. Now, when I'm cutting back on fat, I'm a bit more cognizant of the carbohydrate intake. So that might mean reducing my Greek yogurt, my raw milk, that sort of thing. Maybe I won't use as much burgers from the shop with little sneaky ingredients, things like that. So less rusk, maybe less wheat flour if there's any in that. Then I'd say I'd reduce down to I'm actually about 150 fat right now, which is about half what I was on before. But I'm doing a steep cut just to get rid of a lot of fat. I'm going to go on a diet break in a few weeks for about 2 weeks, which is just eating back at maintenance level. Then I cut again. So I don't believe people should cut for 20 weeks straight. I'm more of a fan of splitting up in the middle somewhere, and it's what we call a diet break. It seems to be, according to studies, the most effective way to go about it. And that's regardless if you're lean or over fat. It's good for the brain, gets your metabolic rate back up to par, so you're not reducing. And yeah, right now the day of eating for me looks something like, I want to say, it's hard to think now, probably about 1.3 kilos of meat, that's lean meat. I'm doing about 400 to 500 milliliters of raw milk. I'm doing about 100 milliliters of single cream, about 80 grams of whey protein, and that's it for the most part. Then every now and then I add in mackerel, salmon, fish. The meat can be beef or chicken. It tends to be mostly beef, about 70% of it. But I find that when I'm cutting back, I tend to eat less quantities of food. But I just pick the ones that I know are going to hit that satiety factor. So for me, that's going to be the meat, obviously. You have to chew it. It gives you that mastication sense, that feeling, oh, I'm eating something. Whereas if I'm slamming down protein shakes, in the off season, it goes down a bit easier, it goes down a bit quicker, so you can eat more food effectively, and it's sweeter, high palatable. So it just comes down to eating the more boring foods, I find, which is just inevitable. But I quite enjoy it. And the moment you do eat anything sweet, so if I have a coffee with a bit of, sugar-free sweetener in it, which is going to kill me apparently, then, go at it. I quite enjoy that. And that one coffee is my fix for the day sort of thing. So
Yeah. Well, this next question might throw people a little bit, but does anaerobic exercise exist?
That's a good question. So The idea is that we have aerobic states and anaerobic states of activity. So aerobics usually the idea that we have to do long distance cardio to build up our cardiovascular potential. So we've got a low resting heart rate and our heart's stronger, less inflammation, less disease. There's a fine limit to how much cardio we can do. That's very individual. I'll say that's a 6'1" male, 108 kilos right now. I have a very normal sized heart for a man of my size, which is good because I don't have extra stress in my body. I don't have extra stuff in my body that I don't necessarily need. Now, when it comes to anaerobic exercise, it's usually the fact that we're trying to get in like very significant activity, but in a short period of time. So think high intensity sprints, stuff on the bike, Tabata training. We do like maybe 10 seconds fast, 10 seconds, something like that. All that sort of things are meant to be anaerobic. You build up a lot more lactic acid quicker, with just a buffer. And it's also, believe it or not, an energy substrate for the activity that you're about to do, because your body is going to find ways to fuel you. Because why else would a human run for no reason? If I'm sprinting, my body's going to do everything it can to work out, this guy's in danger, let's up the stress hormones, up the cortisol, fine tune his vision, sharpen things, all that sort of stuff. Hearing improves. Dopamine's released. So then as a result of resting from the activity, because then your body goes into that sympathetic nervous system state, you're rested. So it's all about hormones and getting in the right stuff, biochemistry. But it is a sliding scale in that there isn't one than the other. There's not two different biological systems that come into it when it comes to aerobic and anaerobic. So you have an activity which is more, should I say, invasive to your system over a short period of time, and one which is less invasive. I'd say, broadly speaking, I either like to walk or sprint or train really hard. It seems to be that the middle distance stuff, so think zone 2, seems to be what really triggers that left ventricular hypertrophy, which seems to be linked to heart attacks in a lot of longer or mid-distance athletes. So yeah, I think bang for your buck, you're better off doing weight training. If you want to add something to it, go for a walk outside, get some sunlight. I don't really look at additional cardio as a mainstay of anyone's routine. I think it can be quite abrasive to the joints because, if you're running on a treadmill, that's going to destroy your knees over a period of time. You're putting something like 10 times of your body weight through your knees and your spine just to move from A to B. And it's a good way to get miserable, staring at those blue lights in a gym, staring at a screen. It's not a fun position to be in my experience. So I'd much rather see someone just go for a walk outside.
Sure. I was going to ask you just one final question, but that's just reminded me. What's your opinion on exercising in blue light? Is that detrimental? Perhaps should we be doing it outside if we can?
I've looked at it a lot myself, and I have collaborated with my friend, Dr. Sarah Pugh, who I'm pretty sure you know of. She's a quantum biologist. She knows a lot about all that stuff. She's brilliant. But what I kind of do is I limit my exposure to blue light. So, for example, I'm using my phone to record it right now, but it's got a red screen on it. So my phone is almost never blue bright like it is usually. I use blue blocking glasses. Now this is just at night time or from staring at the screen for too long. You can also get yellow ones for daytime, give you a bit better vision, but I don't bother with them too much. If you open a window, that'll allow more natural light to come in, which is great for you. I think that if someone can get outside in the sun about 3 times per day for 10 minutes, that will do the job. Blue blocking at night, so the blue blocking glasses, blue blocking filter on your screen, that will help somewhat. Not being around tech for too long at night. Don't go on your phone first thing in the morning. Get outside, do some grounding, stuff like that. Very simple biohacks, but once you start implementing them, all these effects start to accumulate. Now, would I like to work out outside? Right now, no, because it's raining. But I would like to if there was a gym outside and it was, somewhat sheltered and I wasn't under blue lights. It would be brilliant for me. But what I tend to do is just go to the gym and, like I said at the start, limit my exposure. So that means try and get in and out in 40 to 45 minutes. If I look at my phone to record my workouts or track something, it's got that blue light filter on it. I don't look up at the light when I'm training because that's bright and that's going to overstimulate me. I'm autistic. I'm very hypersensitive to light, sound, smell, touch. So I'm very sensitive to that. So that's a big biohack for me as an individual.
Lastly, just a trivial one, really. Who are your top 2 bodybuilders and why?
Good question. My first favorite is Cedric McMillan, Black African-American bodybuilder. He passed a couple of years ago now, but he was a cool guy. I met him at a bodybuilding exhibition. Absolute god of his physique. Waist like 28 inches, shoulders like 30 inches wide, like absurd proportions, round shape, all that sort of thing. I've won, I'd have to say, either Sean Roden, Phil Heath, or Samson Dowder. So I don't really know. At the moment, it has to be Samson because he is alive and he is actively competing. So there we go.
Nice. And lastly, where can we find you? You offer a consultancy service, and obviously I'll list all that down in the description below.
Cool, cheers. Yeah, so you can find me at Carnivore Muscle, which is my YouTube channel. It's Carnivore Muscle. Look, it says here. The logo is that. There we go. My website is compositionconsultant.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me, through there, book a consultation. They're very affordable. Well, I think so anyway. They're a lot cheaper than the average person or vegan nutritionist around here, so it sounds good to me. Diet plans, training plans, coaching plans, ebooks. Pretty much all you need to do to get started in bodybuilding or body composition as a whole on the carnivore diet. So yeah, I think it's pretty good stuff.
Nice, yeah. If you haven't already, go and subscribe to Jonathan. He's got a lot of videos up, very, very informative, and they're specialised, which is what's great. You're very specialised, one particular facet, if you like, of carnivore. So, all right, Jonathan,
Sure,
well, I do appreciate your time, especially on a Saturday, being so generous. It's been fun, very informative, and we'll catch up behind the scenes, I guess.
My pleasure. Cheers.